The clock on the mantel reads 3:56 in the morning. Silence swallows the lodge like a tomb. Nora Morgan crashes through the front door and the sound is everything, the bang of wood against wall, the shriek of wind, the wet slap of her body hitting the frame. Snow swirls into the marble entryway in crystalline spirals. She is 27 years old but looks decades older. Her black maid's uniform hangs from her frame in tatters, the shoulder ripped open, exposing a canvas of purple bruises blooming across her collarbone like poisonous flowers. Her hair is matted with blood, plastered to bone-pale skin. One eye swollen completely shut. Her throat decorated with handprints, dark as ink, dark as a death sentence. She tries to walk but her legs buckle, her body falling forward like a puppet with its strings cut. The room goes absolutely still. Lucian Caruso stands frozen with a crystal whiskey glass suspended in his hand. He is 34 years old, tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a charcoal suit that cost more than Nora makes in 6 months. His dark eyes are burning with something dangerous, rage, betrayal, the kind of cold fury that makes powerful men step backward. Beside him stand Bruno and Luca, lieutenants in the Caruso family for 15 years each, their black suits immaculate, their faces carved from stone. The fireplace crackles behind them, flames dancing against the stone walls of the mountain lodge perched above Los Angeles like a fortress. Nora's breath rattles. Wet. Laboured. She tries to speak but only blood bubbles from her split lip, dripping onto the marble floor, creating small red pools like fallen rose petals. Bruno's hand moves to his weapon. "Boss, we got an intruder." Lucian's eyes narrow. He sees the black maid's uniform, even torn and blooded. He recognizes her. She cleans this lodge twice a week. Nora Morgan. The quiet woman who comes Tuesday and Thursday afternoons, who moves through rooms like a ghost, invisible the way invisible people learn to be. But never like this. Never broken. Nora's knees buckle completely. She slides down the doorframe, leaving a smear of red against the polished wood. Her good eye, the left one, finds Lucian's face. There is something in that look. Recognition mixed with terror. The kind of desperate prayer that comes when hope has already died. She whispers, "He found me." And then she falls. Lucian moves in 3 strides. The whiskey glass vanishes from his hand. He catches her before her head cracks against the stone, his arms sudden and certain around her broken body. Her skin is ice-cold, damp with snow and blood. She weighs almost nothing, he realizes this immediately, the way her frame feels hollow, like she is made of sticks and desperation held together with nothing but sheer will. "Call the doctor," he says. His voice is deep and solid like an oath. "Tell him to be here in 15 minutes. He doesn't come, I know where his family lives." Bruno is already moving, phone to his ear. Nora's one good eye flutters. She tries to focus on his face but cannot seem to hold the image. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't be here, I didn't know where else." "Stop talking," Lucian says. He lifts her carefully, cradling her against his chest. "Save your strength." But what she did not know was that she had just collapsed into the arms of a man on the worst night of his own life. Just 4 hours earlier, in a penthouse office across Los Angeles, Lucian had learned that his younger brother, Dante, his only family, the person he had sacrificed everything to protect, had made a deal with their enemies. Federal agents. The Torino family. Everyone. For money. For safety. For a new life in witness protection, Dante had handed over 15 years of Caruso operations, names of 12 judges on their payroll, the locations of 6 safe houses, and the identity of the prosecutor who had protected them since 2008. Lucian had built an empire from nothing, had buried 2 bodies with his own hands to keep his brother safe, and Dante had sold it all for a $250,000 federal settlement and plane tickets to Portland. The betrayal had carved something cold and dark into Lucian's chest, the kind of wound that bleeds inward, the kind that makes a man feel like his entire life has been a lie lived in the dark. And now this girl, this broken girl in a maid's uniform, is bleeding in his arms. He carries her into the lodge's main room, toward the bedroom on the eastern wing. Marco appears in the hallway, another lieutenant, younger than Bruno and Luca, with quick eyes and quicker hands. His suit is rumpled. He had been sleeping when Lucian summoned everyone an hour ago. "Get towels," Lucian says. "Hot water." The first aid kit from the kitchen. "Boss, should we call the police?" Marco asks. His hand hovers uncertainly at his side. "No police," Lucian says. His tone leaves no room for questions. "Only the doctor. Nobody else knows about this." He lays Nora on the bed in the guest bedroom, the one with the white silk sheets that cost $300 per set. The blood seems obscene against all that white. Her breathing is shallow. The bruises on her throat are already darkening, swelling. Lucian can see the finger marks clearly, 5 fingers on the left side, 4 on the right. Someone had tried to crush her windpipe. Someone had wanted her dead. Bruno appears in the doorway, phone still pressed to his ear. "Doctor is en route. ETA 12 minutes. Who did this to you?" Lucian asks, but his voice is gentle now. No edges. He sits beside her on the bed, careful not to touch her injuries, just present. Just watching. Nora's good eye finds his again. "Douglas Hale," she whispers. Her voice sounds like it has been dragged through gravel. "He said I belong to him. He said if I run again, he'd destroy everything. Everyone I ever knew." The name lands in the room like a gunshot in the silence. Bruno and Luca exchange a look. Neither has heard this name before, which means it is not part of the Caruso organization. Which means it is an outsider. Which means it is worse. "Where does Hale operate?" Lucian asks. "I don't know," Nora says. "I don't know anything. That's why he found me. That's why he did this. I tried to escape 3 months ago and he's been hunting me since. I changed my name 3 times. I moved 5 times. I thought if I came here, to the mountains, if I took a job where nobody would look for me." She trails off. A tear slides down her pale cheek, cutting through the dried blood. "I wasn't supposed to leave. He said I was his. He said his partner wanted to use me for something and I tried to say no and he..." She doesn't finish the sentence. The bedroom door opens and Dr. Feldman enters, medical bag in hand, face grim. He is in his 60s, gray-haired, sharp-eyed. He works exclusively for the Caruso family. He asks no questions and forgets everything he sees. "Everyone out," he says, already unwrapping Nora's torn uniform to assess the damage beneath. "Boss, you too." Lucian stands and steps into the hallway, where Bruno and Luca are waiting like stone statues. "Find out everything about Douglas Hale," Lucian says quietly. "Who he is, where he operates, who his partners are, what he does. I want names, addresses, bank accounts, family members. Everything." "We'll have something by dawn," Bruno says. "You'll have something by sunrise," Lucian corrects. "That gives you 2 hours and 43 minutes. The men nod and vanish into the darkness of the lodge, already pulling out phones, already reaching out to sources, already beginning the machinery of investigation that a man like Lucian can set in motion with 6 words. He walks to the windows that overlook the Los Angeles skyline sprawling below them, millions of lights like fallen stars. The snow continues to fall, thick and relentless, the weather indifferent to human suffering, the sky heavy and dark as a closed fist. Before we continue, drop a like if this story hits you. Share it with someone you love and subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. The story of how Nora Morgan became invisible is about to unfold, and the choices she made to survive will tear apart everything you think you know about mercy and justice. Now let us go back to where this all began. 15 hours earlier. An apartment building in downtown Los Angeles called the Riverside Towers. The kind of place where the heat barely works in winter and the landlord doesn't return calls. Nora Morgan stands in her kitchen, which is really just a corner of her studio apartment with a hot plate and a mini-fridge that hums like a dying animal. She counts the bills in her wallet with fingers that shake. $24. She spreads it on the counter like tarot cards reading her future. Next to the money sits a photograph, old and worn at the edges. A man in a navy uniform, laughing at something just out of frame. Her husband, Michael, killed in action in Afghanistan 8 years ago. She touches the photo gently, the way you touch something sacred. Rent is due in 17 days. $2,200. She has earned, in the past 3 weeks, working double shifts at the Silver Moon Diner, approximately $480 after tips. The math does not work. The math has not worked for 6 months. She is $35,000 behind on her apartment lease, 3 months of missed payments, and the eviction notice sits on her nightstand like a countdown to homelessness. She looks around the apartment, the threadbare furniture from Goodwill, the hot plate, the mini fridge, the mattress on the floor because she cannot afford a bed frame. This is everything she owns. This is her entire life, contained in 400 square feet, and it is falling apart. She showers with water that is barely warm, using soap that is nearly gone. She puts on her black maid's uniform, the one she will wear to the Riverside Hotel's cleaning crew in 40 minutes. She has 2 jobs now. The diner during the day. Hotels at night. She sleeps maybe 4 hours. She cannot remember the last time she felt hungry because she is always hungry. It has become the baseline of her existence, the white noise she no longer notices. In the mirror, a stranger looks back. A woman who looks 40 but is only 27. Hair thin and listless. Eyes hollowed out. Cheekbones sharp enough to cut. She is disappearing. Every day she becomes a little more invisible. By the time she arrives at the Riverside Hotels at 10 p.m., the sun has been gone for 4 hours and the city is moving into the darker parts of the night. The kind of hour when dangerous people wake up. She has no idea that tonight, in a luxury suite on the 17th floor, a man named Douglas Hale is about to change her life forever. The Riverside Hotel's cleaning crew operates on a schedule that doesn't care about human exhaustion. Nora Morgan arrives at 10 p.m. with her cart of supplies, her black and white uniform still damp from the diner shift, her hands raw from scalding water and bleach. The night staff nods at her without seeing her. She is a ghost moving through corridors of polished marble and expensive silence. She doesn't know that on the 17th floor, a man named Douglas Hale is waiting for someone. He is waiting for her, though they have never met. But first, there is the drive north. Every Tuesday and Friday, Nora makes a 4-hour journey from Los Angeles in her Honda Civic, a car with 180,000 miles and sounds like a dying animal. The transmission slips. The radiator overheats. She has $34 in her pocket and cannot afford a mechanic, so she drives with the windows down in December, letting the cold keep the engine from seizing entirely. The Caruso Mountain Lodge materializes through the trees like a castle that fell from heaven and landed on the California coast. Stone walls. 17 rooms. A fireplace so massive you could stand inside it. Nora has cleaned this house every Tuesday and Friday for 8 months. She has never been invited past the kitchen. 3 weeks before the blizzard, she arrives at 9 a.m. with her supplies. The housekeeper, a woman named Patricia who is old enough to be her mother but speaks to her like she is a dog, hands her cash without counting it. $120, always. The great room, Patricia says. The fireplace. It is dark. Make it shine. Nora nods and says nothing. Speaking is for people who are real. The great room is enormous. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlook a valley that drops into nothing. The fireplace dominates the north wall like a monument to wealth, black stone, gold inlay, a hearth so deep you could lie down inside it. Nora kneels on the cold tile floor with a brush and a bucket of soapy water. She scrubs in circles, small and patient, her knees aching within minutes. She has been there for 7 minutes when 2 men walk in. They are discussing something in low voices. One is Bruno, who has worked for Lucian Caruso for 12 years. The other is Luca, his cousin, who has worked for him for longer. They wear suits that cost more than Nora's monthly rent. They move like men who have never worried about paying bills. The betrayal is complete, Bruno says. His voice is steady, but underneath it runs something like a razor. Matteo has given the Torino family everything. Every operation. Every warehouse. Every contact in the Port Authority. They sit on the leather sofa 10 feet from where Nora kneels on the floor. They do not look at her. She is furniture. Lucian knows. Luca asks. He knows, Bruno says. And he is deciding what that means. Nora continues scrubbing. Her hands move mechanically. Around the stone, into the grooves, up the sides where soot has settled like a permanent shadow. The water in her bucket turns black. She doesn't hear most of what they say after that. Something about loyalty. Something about mercy being a luxury they cannot afford. Words like empire and betrayal and blood debt. She scrubs harder, pressing the brush into the stone as if she can scrub away her own existence, as if she can disappear entirely. When they leave, the room is quiet except for the sound of her breathing and the soft bristle of the brush against stone. At 1 p.m., Nora sits in her car in the employee lot, eating the sandwich she brought from home, 2 pieces of bread, a slice of cheese she has had for 4 days. She pulls out her phone. There is a text message from an unknown number. You can't hide forever. Her hands begin to shake. She deletes it immediately. Her phone screen goes dark. She sits there with her half-eaten sandwich, watching the forest through the windshield, trying to convince her body that she is safe. She is not safe. She has not been safe in 6 months. 6 months earlier, Nora was someone different. She was married. Her name was still Nora Morgan, but it meant something else then. Michael Morgan was a construction worker with calloused hands and a laugh that filled their small apartment. He worked in commercial building, the kind of job that paid enough to rent a 2-bedroom in Koreatown, enough to put Emma in after-school care, enough to imagine a future that didn't feel like drowning in slow motion. The cough started in October. Just a cold, Michael said. Just a cough. He refused to go to the doctor because they had no health insurance. The job didn't offer it. They were saving for it, but every dollar had somewhere else it needed to go. Rent. Emma's school. Food. Gas. By November, the cough sounded like something breaking inside his chest. We should go to the hospital, Nora said. They were in bed, dark except for the streetlight coming through the window. We can't afford it, Michael said. I don't care. You sound like you're dying. I'm not dying. I'm fine. It's just a cold. But it wasn't just a cold. By the time they went to the emergency room, when Michael's fever reached 104 and he was coughing up blood, it was pneumonia. Advanced pneumonia. Untreated pneumonia that had already started destroying his lungs. He was in the hospital for 15 days. The medical bills arrived like death notices in plain envelopes. $35,000. ICU care, ventilator assistance, antibiotics that cost more than a car payment. The hospital sent 7 notices before he died. He saw 2 of them from his hospital bed. The third one arrived the day before he stopped breathing. Michael Morgan was 34 years old when he died. Emma was 7. The funeral was small. Only Nora and Emma at the grave. His mother had died 10 years earlier. His father had walked out when Michael was 3. There was no one else who came. The funeral home cost $2,000, which came from a credit card Nora had saved for emergencies. This was an emergency. The medical debt was $35,000. She had $34 in her pocket after she buried her husband. Now, 3 weeks later, Nora picks up Emma from her sister's house in Los Angeles. Emma is 7 years old and has Michael's eyes, dark brown, serious, watching everything. She climbs into the passenger seat of the Honda, and the car smells like coffee and exhaust and the broken air conditioning that blows but doesn't cool. Did you have a good day? Nora asks. Aunt Sarah says we can stay longer, Emma says. She says you work too much. Nora's hands tighten on the steering wheel. Your aunt is kind, but this is our home. Our apartment. We don't have an apartment anymore, Emma says. She is looking out the window. She says it like she is stating a fact about the weather. Mrs. Chen said the eviction people came. She said our stuff was in boxes in the hallway. Nora pulls the car over. She cannot see through the tears that have suddenly blurred everything. She grips the steering wheel and breathes. Emma reaches over and touches her arm. When can we have our own house again? Emma asks. Nora swallows. She reaches over and pulls Emma into her arms, feeling the small body against hers, feeling the weight of a child who should never have to worry about housing, about money, about whether her mother can keep her alive. Soon, baby, Nora whispers. Soon. I promise you, soon. But what she did not know was that in another part of the city, a man named Douglas Hale was looking for her. He had been looking for her since she tried to escape his network 6 months ago, the week before Michael got sick. She had worked for him for 2 years without understanding what she was working for. By the time she understood, she was trapped. And 3 hours away, in a stone mansion on the coast, Lucian Caruso was discovering that betrayal runs deeper than blood. The stone mansion stood silent at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, snow mounting against the windows like a siege. Inside, Lucian Caruso sat at his desk in the study, 3 documents spread before him like a confession. Wire transfers. Encrypted messages. Routing codes for shipments that should have been protected by blood, by honor, by the oath that bound the Caruso family together for 43 years. His younger brother Marco would be arriving in 12 minutes. Lucian was 47 years old, with dark hair silvered at the temples and a scar that ran from the corner of his left eye to his jawline, a gift from a rival who had learned too late that mercy and violence were not opposites in Lucian's world. He wore a charcoal suit that cost $4,000, tailored to a body that moved like a weapon, carefully controlled. His eyes were the color of storm clouds, and in this moment, they were absolutely still. Bruno and Luca flanked the fireplace behind him, 2 lieutenants who had served Lucian for 15 and 18 years respectively. The fire crackled, throwing shadows across the mahogany walls lined with first editions and photographs of dead men who had built this empire from blood and silence. He is on his way, Bruno said quietly. Lucian did not look up from the documents. I know. The study was cold despite the fire. Outside, the blizzard had begun to build its walls, snow already 6 inches deep on the driveway, the wind howling like something with a voice and a purpose. Lucian had spent his entire adult life preparing for moments like this, moments when the people closest to you became the greatest threat, when mercy became indistinguishable from suicide. When the door opened, Marco smiled. He was 31 years old, with the same dark eyes as Lucian but softer, kinder, untouched by the weight that lived in Lucian's chest. Marco still believed in second chances. Marco still went to church. Marco still thought that love was stronger than business, and that blood was thicker than betrayal. Marco would learn differently today. Brother, Marco said, walking across the room with his hand extended. The weather is terrible. I almost did not make it. Lucian gestured to the documents without speaking. Marco's hand froze midair. His eyes moved across the desk, and Lucian watched the exact moment his younger brother understood what was happening. The blood drained from Marco's face like someone had pulled a plug. His fingers began to tremble. These are from the last 6 months, Lucian said, his voice like ice water poured into a glass. Wire transfers totaling $740,000. Encrypted messages to the Torino family. Routing information for 12 shipments. You sold them our routes, Marco. You sold them our business. You sold them us. Lucian, please, Marco whispered. He reached for the desk and gripped its edge. They threatened my wife. They threatened the children. They said if I did not cooperate they would burn the house with us inside it. I had no choice. Lucian rose from his chair slowly. He walked to the fireplace and stood before the flames, his profile sharp enough to cut glass. When he spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper, which made it more terrible than if he had screamed. You always have a choice, Marco. You chose them. Over blood. Over oath. Over the family that raised you after father died, after I gave up everything I wanted to keep you safe. Lucian turned to face his brother. You chose wrong. Marco fell to his knees. Tears streamed down his face. Lucian, please. I am begging you. I will fix this. I will tell them I cannot help them anymore. I will fix it. You cannot fix this, Bruno said quietly from the doorway. The Torino family already moved 3 shipments. They already know our timing, our routes, our vulnerabilities. You have created a war, Marco. You have created a war and we will have to fight it now, and people will die because of what you did. The room was so quiet you could hear the clock on the mantel ticking, each second like a small death. Lucian looked at his brother, this boy he had raised, this person he had loved more than anything in this world, and he made a choice. He made it without hesitation, without mercy, without the luxury of sentiment. Take him to the safe house in San Bernardino, Lucian said, turning back to the fire. Maximum security. No visitors. No phone calls. He stays there under guard until I decide what to do with him. Lucian, no, please. And strip his accounts. All of them. Give his wife enough to live on for 2 years, then nothing. He is no longer part of this family. He has no name here anymore. He has no money. He has no claim on Caruso property or Caruso protection. As far as I am concerned, my brother died today. They took Marco out screaming. His voice echoed through the corridors of the mansion like a ghost already, a man already erased from the world he had known. Bruno walked out behind them. Luca hesitated in the doorway. In 15 years, Luca said carefully, I have never seen you make a decision like this. I have never heard you take that tone with blood. I did not think you were capable of it. Lucian did not respond. He stood alone by the fireplace, watching the flames devour wood and time and mercy. His hands were steady. His breathing was controlled. Inside his chest, something cold and dark and absolute had hardened into stone. He picked up a glass of whiskey from the side table and did not drink it. He simply held it, watching the light move through the amber liquid, thinking about the cost of survival and the price of power and the moment when mercy stops being a choice and becomes a liability you cannot afford. The blizzard outside had intensified. Snow now covered the windows completely, sealing the mansion in white silence. At 3:35 in the afternoon, the wind began to shake the windows in their frames. The temperature dropped 10 more degrees. And 17 minutes away, in a Honda Civic on a highway with visibility down to 50 feet, a woman named Nora Morgan was running toward the only shelter she could find, bleeding from 100 small wounds, $34 in her pocket, and a prayer on her lips that God would not let her die before she could see her daughter again. She did not know that the man inside that mansion had just lost everything that mattered to him. She did not know that he was about to find something he thought he had lost forever. At 4 o'clock, Nora's car skidded off the mountain road. At 4:15, after she had crawled through the snow and collapsed against the door to the mansion, after Bruno had carried her inside and laid her on a bed in the guest room, Lucian sat in his study still holding that glass of untouched whiskey. The blizzard had sealed the roads completely. No one could leave. No one could come in. The world outside had stopped moving. That was when Nora opened her eyes. The guest bedroom was painted the color of cream, with soft lamps casting warm light across walls lined with books no one had read in years. Nora was lying in a bed that felt like sleeping on a cloud made of money, wearing a white nightgown that was not hers, and her entire body was screaming. Every nerve ending was burning. Her face throbbed with a pain so intense it felt like someone had replaced her skin with broken glass. She tried to sit up and the room tilted. She tried to stand and collapsed back onto the mattress with a cry that tore her damaged throat. The door opened before she could take another breath. Lucian Caruso entered carrying a wooden tray with soup and bread, still wearing the same charcoal suit from the afternoon, his tie loosened, his jaw shadowed with exhaustion. He was a beautiful man in the way that knives are beautiful, with no softness anywhere in his face. When he saw her eyes were open, something in his expression shifted by the smallest degree. "You are awake," he said. He set the tray on the table beside the bed, moving with deliberate slowness, keeping his hands visible. "Do not be afraid. You are safe here." Nora pressed herself against the headboard, trying to make distance between herself and this man, this stranger, this person who had brought her into his house. "Please," she whispered. Her voice came out shattered, barely audible. "Please do not hurt me." "No one will hurt you here," he said. His voice was low and solid, like an oath. "You were hurt enough. That stops now. I have to go. He will find me. He will find me and he will." Her hand went to her throat where the bruises were blooming into deep purple and black, the shape of fingers that belonged to Douglas Hale. "He will kill me." "Who will find you?" Lucian asked. He pulled a chair from the corner and sat down across from the bed, far enough away that she would not panic, close enough that she would know he was not leaving. Nora's breathing was shallow and rapid, pain flashing with every small movement. But something in this man's stillness was different from the violence she had known. He was not approaching her. He was not touching her. He was simply sitting, waiting, as if he had all the time in the world and none of it mattered. "Douglas Hale," she whispered. "He owns me." In the doorway behind him, Bruno's entire body went rigid, the way a dog's body goes rigid when it smells something dangerous on the wind. Nora began to speak, and the story came out in pieces, broken sentences that did not follow any logical order because her mind was shattered the way her voice was shattered, scrambling between past and present, between terror and the slow realization that she was not about to be hurt again, that something had changed in the world between one moment and the next. After Michael died, she could not pay the $35,000 in medical bills. The hospital called every day. The collection agency sent letters. She was going to lose everything. And then one morning at the hospital, a woman approached her in the cafeteria, a woman named Catherine Mercer who was all silk scarves and sympathy and a smile that made Nora want to believe that the world still had kindness in it somewhere. Catherine had offered her a job. $500 a week as a live-in maid for wealthy families. No experience necessary. Housing provided. It had felt like a miracle. The first house was normal. Quiet. The woman who lived there was a lawyer, professional, demanding but not cruel. After 3 weeks, Catherine moved Nora to a second house, and the second house locked her in at night. The third house was where she met Douglas Hale. He was in his mid-40s, with pale eyes and the kind of expensive suit that whispered money and power. He told her that she now owed him $200,000 for room and board and transportation. He told her the debt was binding. He told her that if she tried to leave, if she tried to run, there would be consequences. "Where is your daughter?" he had asked. "My daughter is with my sister," Nora had said carefully. He had smiled. "That is good. That is very good. Because if you try to leave, if you try to run, if you try to tell anyone what happens in this house, your sister will have a visitor. And your daughter will learn the difference between obedience and pain." Nora had stayed. She had cleaned his house. She had done things she could not speak out loud, things that had broken something inside her that she did not think could ever be repaired. She had stolen every dollar she could from the houses where he sent her to work, hiding cash in her shoes, in her bra, in the lining of her coat. 6 months she had saved. 6 months and $3,200, which she knew was not enough to pay down the $200,000 debt but which was enough to run, enough to try to disappear. 2 weeks ago, she had run. She had gone to Catherine Mercer and told her she was quitting. Catherine had laughed. Catherine had made calls to every family who had ever employed Nora and told them that Nora was a thief, that she had stolen jewelry and money, that she was unstable and dangerous and could not be trusted. Within 3 days, Nora had no references. Within 5 days, no one would hire her. She had taken every job she could find, cleaning houses for cash, working double shifts at a diner, anything to keep Emma fed. She had rented a small apartment on the bad side of town, a place where Douglas would not look, a place where she thought they might be safe. But he had found her. Last night he had found her apartment. He had been looking for her since she tried to escape his network 6 months ago, searching through the city like a predator searching for wounded prey. "I have $34 left," Nora whispered. "That is all I have. That is everything." Lucian rose from the chair and walked to the window. Outside, snow was falling so heavily that the world beyond the glass had been erased, replaced with white silence. When he spoke, his voice was measured and careful. "You will not be going anywhere," he said. "Not until you are healed. Not until we handle what needs to be handled." He turned to face her. "Bruno," he said quietly. Bruno stepped forward from the doorway. He was a large man, 6'2", with the kind of solid build that came from 40 years of taking care of problems. In 15 years of working for Lucian, he had learned to read the smallest shifts in his boss's expression, and he read one now. "Find out everything about Douglas Hale," Lucian said. "Everything. Where he lives, where he works, who he does business with, how many people are in his network, how many victims. And find out everything about Catherine Mercer. Her bank accounts, her connections, the names of everyone she has worked with. Everything." "It will take a few hours," Bruno said. "I have time," Lucian replied. He looked back at Nora. "Rest. Eat the soup. We will talk more when you are stronger." But before he left the room, he said something else, something so quiet that Nora almost did not hear it. "Because the people who did this believed you were nobody," he said. "And that belief needs to be corrected." By 10 o'clock that morning, as the blizzard continued to rage and seal the roads, Luca returned to the study with a laptop and a folder of documents. What he had found was systematic, organized, and worse than either of them had anticipated. Douglas Hale was a known human trafficker with documented connections to at least 12 victims currently in his network. He operated through legitimate staffing agencies, companies that seemed professional and real on paper, companies that placed vulnerable women in homes where he had arrangements with wealthy employers who did not ask questions about what happened behind closed doors. Catherine Mercer's role was different. She was the armor, the respectability, the social weapon. She had a network of philanthropic organizations, charity boards, connections to 3 judges in Los Angeles, a reputation built on decades of appearing generous and kind. When women in Hale's network tried to escape, when they tried to tell their stories, Catherine would make calls to their former employers. She would spread rumors that they were thieves or addicts or mentally unstable. She would destroy their credibility so completely that when they went to the police, no one believed them. When they tried to find new work, no one would hire them. She isolated them by making the world reject them. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Nora sat by the fireplace in the main study, wrapped in a cashmere blanket that probably cost more than a month of her old rent. She watched Lucian work at his desk across the room, his suit jacket removed, his sleeves rolled up, documents and a laptop spread across the mahogany surface. He looked like a man who carried the weight of the city on his shoulders, and perhaps he did. She did not know who he was. She did not know that the mansion she was sitting in was worth $12 million, or that the man across the room controlled a shipping empire that moved goods throughout the Pacific, or that his word was law in a world most people did not even know existed. She only knew that he had saved her. That he had brought her into his home. That he had not hurt her. "Why are you really helping me?" she asked quietly. Lucian looked up from his work. For a moment he did not speak, and in that moment, Nora saw something raw in his eyes, something damaged and desperate and alone. He set down his pen and leaned back in his chair. "I had to make a choice today," he said. His voice was quiet. A choice between mercy and survival. Between protecting someone I loved and protecting everyone else. He paused. "I chose survival. I chose to remove the threat, to eliminate the weakness, to do what needed to be done. And in doing that, I lost the thing I was trying to protect." He looked at her directly. You came to my door bleeding and desperate, and for the first time today, I realized that mercy is not the opposite of strength. Mercy is what remains when you have the power to destroy and you choose not to. Mercy is what separates us from the people who hurt us. Nora understood. She understood because she had lived in a world where mercy was a weapon used against her, where gentleness was mistaken for weakness, where the only language people understood was the language of pain and control. To be saved by someone who chose mercy, to be seen by someone who saw her as worth saving, was so foreign that she could barely comprehend it. We are both running from people we should have been able to trust, she whispered. Yes, he said. But we are not running anymore. The blizzard continued. The roads remained sealed. In the lodge, Nora slept in the guest room, her body beginning the slow process of healing, her wounds cleaned and bandaged, her mind slowly accepting that she was safe. Downstairs, in the study and on laptops, Lucian and Bruno and Luca built a case against Douglas Hale and Catherine Mercer, gathering every piece of evidence, every victim testimony, every shred of proof that would be needed. But what they did not know was that Douglas Hale had already discovered that Nora had run to the mountains. What they did not know was that he was already making phone calls, already moving through the network of judges and corrupt officials that protected him, already preparing to come find her. What they did not know was that the storm would not last forever. The phone rang at 6:53 in the morning, and the sound cut through the lodge like a blade through silence. Nora was alone in the kitchen, her fingers wrapped around a mug of tea she had not tasted, her swollen eye fixed on the window where the blizzard was finally breaking. Snow dripped from the eaves in steady rhythm. The world outside was becoming visible again. That was the problem. She did not recognize the number. Every instinct screamed not to answer. Her hand moved to silence it anyway, but something stopped her. The same instinct that had kept her alive this long. If she did not answer, he would know she was hiding. If she answered, she could at least hear his voice, could at least prepare. She pressed the phone to her ear. "Hello, Nora." His voice was silk over razor blades, smooth and lethal. "Did you really think you could hide in the mountains?" Her breath stopped. The tea mug slipped from her fingers and shattered on the tile floor. "I know exactly where you are." Douglas Hale's laugh was the sound of a man who had never been stopped, never been threatened, never imagined consequences. "Catherine has been very helpful. She knows the Caruso housekeeper, did you know that? Such a small world. Such a connected world. I will be there by noon, Nora. And this time, I am bringing Emma with me." "No." The word came out as a whisper that cracked like dry wood. "No, please, she is only 7, she has nothing to do with. You will watch what I do to her before I kill you both." The line went dead. For 3 seconds, Nora could not breathe. Her body was moving before her mind caught up, backing away from the counter, her hands coming up to cover her face. The bruises on her throat throbbed. The cuts on her wrists burned. Worst of all was the image in her mind, Emma in a car with that man, Emma terrified, Emma calling for her mother while Nora stood somewhere far away, helpless. Lucian was beside her before she fully collapsed. She had not heard him enter, had not heard his footsteps on the stone floor. One moment she was alone in her spiraling panic, and the next his hands were on her shoulders, his voice cutting through the chaos like a command that could not be disobeyed. "Nora! Look at me!" She could not. Her eyes were fixed on nothing, her breathing coming in sharp, broken gasps. "Look at me!" She forced her eyes up to his face. His expression was terrifying in its stillness. All the gentleness from the night before had calcified into something else. Something cold as winter stone. She told him everything. The phone call. Hale's voice. The threat about Emma. The promise that he was coming here, coming now. The words spilled from her mouth in fragments, incomplete sentences, the speech of someone drowning. Lucian listened without moving. His jaw tightened. That was the only change in his expression, but it was enough. When she finished, he walked to the window and looked out at the melting snow, at the roads that were becoming passable, at the world closing in. He pulled a phone from his pocket and made one call. His voice, when he spoke, was low and precise. "It is done," he said to whoever answered. "Bring him in. Bring them both in. And make certain they understand that there is nowhere in this country where they can run." He ended the call and turned back to Nora. "You are safe," he said. "I told you that you were safe, and I meant it. Nothing is going to happen to Emma. Nothing is going to happen to you." But Nora was not listening anymore. Her mind had already moved forward to 9:13 a.m., to the lodge window, to a view of melting snow that suddenly felt like a countdown. At 9 o'clock, Nora stood at the great window facing east, her reflection ghostly in the glass. The bruises on her face had deepened into shades of yellow and green, the colors of sickness and decay. Her left eye was half open now, the swelling receding just enough to let her see through the narrow slit. She looked like a photograph of someone who had been destroyed and was in the slow process of trying to reassemble herself. The snow dripped from the eaves in a steady, measured rhythm. Each drop that fell was 1 moment closer to noon. 1 moment closer to him arriving. 1 moment closer to whatever came next. She pulled something from her pocket with trembling fingers. A photograph, creased and worn soft from years of being held. Michael. Her husband of 4 years before a drunk driver had taken him on a Tuesday morning at 8:15. She had looked at this photo thousands of times since his death, but today it hit differently. Today it felt like an accusation. "I tried to protect her," she whispered to his image. "I failed. I ran, and I left her, and I failed." The photograph felt so small in her hands. So inadequate. Michael's face looked back at her with the expression he always wore in this photo, that half smile that meant he was thinking of something he would not tell her, some private joke. It was the photo from their wedding day. He had looked so alive. Now he was dust, and she was standing in a mountain lodge owned by a man who existed in a world so far removed from her own that the distance between them felt impossible to bridge. She was alive, but for how long? And at what cost to everyone around her? One foot moved toward the door. Then toward the windows. The snow was melting. The roads were opening. She could walk out into that cold and disappear into the forest. She could lead him away from the lodge, away from Emma, away from Lucian. It would be so simple. One step and then another and then just keep walking until the cold took her. Her hand reached for the window latch. And then she heard Emma's voice from the last phone call they had made, 3 days ago, when Nora was still pretending everything was fine, still pretending she could fix this. "Mommy, when are you coming home?" That voice, small and hopeful and trusting, stopped her cold. If she walked out into that snow and disappeared, Emma would spend the rest of her life wondering where her mother had gone. Wondering if she had been abandoned. Wondering if she had not been worth staying for. She could not do that to her daughter. She could not. Nora turned from the window and sank into the chair by the fire, still holding Michael's photograph against her chest. At 11:53 a.m., 3 black SUVs pulled up to the lodge. The vehicles came to a stop in the circular drive, and men in dark suits emerged from the vehicles, but these were not Douglas Hale's men. The tailoring was different. The bearing was different. These men moved with the confidence of soldiers who reported to someone who answered to no one. Torino family. Bruno was already moving toward the door, already recognizing the insignia on their shirts. Through the window, Nora watched them exchange quiet words, watched the lead soldier nod in a way that suggested everything was already settled, already decided by people operating in a world far above her understanding. Lucian stood beside her. He had been standing there for the last hour, saying nothing, just present. Now he spoke. "I told you that you were safe," he said. "I meant that too." 3 blocks away in Los Angeles, in a parking garage that smelled of concrete and automotive grease and the particular staleness of enclosed spaces, Douglas Hale was still smiling. He had not believed Nora would actually go to the police. Pathetic little Nora, terrified Nora, the girl who had signed her life over to him the moment she needed money for her daughter's hospital bills. The girl who understood the language of debt and control as naturally as she understood breathing. The elevator doors opened on the basement level. 12 men in black moved like ghosts from the shadows between the parked cars. Their footsteps echoed on the concrete floor in a rhythm that was almost musical, measured, unhurried, inevitable. Douglas Hale's smile died. He recognized the markings on their jackets. Torino family. But that made no sense. Torino was supposed to be across the country. Torino was supposed to be. He ran. The men were faster. They moved like a coordinated mechanism, like a system that had been designed and perfected for exactly this purpose. He ran toward his Mercedes, toward the far corner of the garage, but there was nowhere to run. There was nowhere in this city, in this country, where he could run to that would be far enough. They cornered him against his own vehicle. His breathing came in sharp, panic gasps. His hands were shaking. The man at the front of the group held up a photograph, Nora's beaten face, her swollen eye, her bruised throat. The damage he had done preserved in high resolution. Lucian Caruso sends his regards, the soldier said. His voice was without inflection, without emotion. It was the voice of someone carrying out a task that had been assigned to him. Douglas Hale begged. He offered money, 10,000, 50,000, 100,000. He offered information about judges, about corrupt officials, about a network that reached into government at the highest levels. He offered anything, everything, his entire life's accumulation of power and control, all of it negotiable in the face of his terror. None of it mattered. He was dragged screaming into a black van. The van doors slammed shut. The sound of his screaming continued for a few seconds and then was muffled by the mechanics of the vehicle ceiling, and then the van drove away into the LA traffic, just another dark vehicle among thousands of dark vehicles, carrying a man who was about to discover that there were punishments worse than death, fates darker than any prison. He would not die. That would have been too quick, too easy, too merciful. Instead, he would simply disappear into a network far darker and more efficient than his own, where he would become the property he had once traded in. Where his own understanding of fear and control would be rendered quaint by comparison. At 11:45 a.m., Catherine Mercer was sipping chamomile tea in her Brentwood mansion when the knock came at the door. She had been expecting flowers. She had been expecting a message from one of her society friends regretting some slight or requesting her presence at a charity function. She had been expecting the normal rhythms of her perfectly constructed life. Instead, she opened the door to find FBI agents standing on her marble foyer steps, and the first words out of the lead agent's mouth were, "Catherine Mercer, we have a warrant for your arrest related to human trafficking conspiracy, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit assault." The tea mug fell from her hands. Within minutes, the flashes started. Camera crews arrived. News vans positioned themselves on her perfectly manicured lawn. The story of Catherine Mercer, philanthropist, society matriarch, patron of the arts, was being dismantled in real time as the agents led her through her own house, past her own possessions, toward the unmarked car waiting in her driveway. Financial records connecting her to Douglas Hale's network. Testimony from 12 victims. Documentation of her role in isolating trafficking victims, in using her social connections to silence them, in spreading lies that rendered them invisible and worthless. The warrant was airtight. The evidence was overwhelming. By the time she was placed in the back of the federal vehicle, her phone was already lighting up with messages. Her board positions were being terminated. Her charity affiliations were being dissolved. Her carefully constructed reputation, the thing she had spent decades building and maintaining, was collapsing like a structure made of paper in a rainstorm. Within hours, her society friends blocked her numbers. Within days, 40 years of federal prison stretched out before her like a sentence with no possibility of reprieve. She would spend the rest of her life in a federal facility, stripped of her title and her status and her money, reduced to a number in a system that did not care about her carefully constructed narrative. Back at the lodge, Nora heard none of this. But Lucian knew. When he stepped outside to meet with Bruno, when he checked his phone and read the messages from his contacts in the federal system and the Torino organization, he understood that two very different kinds of justice had been executed in the same hour. Douglas Hale had disappeared into the network. Catherine Mercer had been erased in front of the entire world. Both of them had been removed from Nora's life. Both of them had been neutralized. Not through direct action, but through the careful orchestration of people with the resources and connections to make such things happen. He walked back inside the lodge and found Nora still sitting by the fire, still holding her husband's photograph. "It is finished," he said simply. Sometimes one hand reached out at the right moment can change an entire life. The tablet screen glowed between them, casting a cold light across the fireplace. Bruno stood silent, his weathered hands holding the device as if it were made of glass, and his dark eyes that had seen 15 years of Lucian's ruthlessness, moved between the news feed and Nora's face. The footage played on loop. Catherine Mercer, her blonde hair perfectly styled, her cream-colored suit impeccable, being led down the marble steps of her estate with federal agents on either side. Her hands were not cuffed. Not yet. But her composure had shattered like a window struck by a stone. Within 3 hours, Bruno said, his voice rough and careful, the FBI executed simultaneous raids on 3 staffing agencies operating in Los Angeles, Santa Monica, and Pasadena. 47 agents. Search warrant signed by a federal judge at 11 p.m. Friday night. Something had to happen at a very high level for that kind of coordination on a weekend. Nora's breath came shallow. She could not look away from the screen. The second video clip showed a younger woman, her face deliberately blurred, her voice steady despite the tremor beneath it. "My name does not matter. What matters is that Douglas Hale kept us in a house on Mulholland Drive. He told us we were worthless. He told us nobody would believe us. He told us that the police would arrest us, not him. Today, he was arrested. Today, I learned I was wrong about being worthless. 12 women had been freed. 12. The text beneath the video scrolled with images of arrest warrants, of federal indictments, of Douglas Hale's face, a man with a square jaw and cold eyes, marked as wanted. But not wanted for much longer. The news reported that he had fled the country Thursday night, that Interpol was tracking a private plane that landed in Cartagena, Colombia, that his assets had been frozen and flagged, that every border in the Western Hemisphere now had his photograph and his fingerprints. She did not say the words aloud, but both men understood Douglas Hale would never make it out of Cartagena alive. Not with the Torino organization looking for him. Not with the kind of bounty that came with knowing exactly where a man was running. Nora's hand trembled as she reached for the tablet. The news shifted to Catherine Mercer's mugshot, her blonde hair disheveled now, her carefully constructed face stripped of makeup and certainty. 40 years. Federal sentencing guidelines. No parole eligibility. No country club minimum security facility. A real prison. The kind with bars and concrete and time that stretched out like a highway with no end. Her lawyer is calling it a witch hunt, Bruno continued, still speaking in that careful, measured tone. Her board is calling it a misunderstanding. Her society friends are calling it a tragedy. But the evidence is very clear. Bank transfers to Douglas Hale. Text messages using coded language to coordinate the isolation of witnesses. A notebook in her safe with detailed instructions on how to keep women compliant through financial dependence and psychological manipulation. The federal prosecutor showed it on the news. Every page was photographed. Nora closed her eyes. She could see Catherine Mercer's face the last time they had been in the same room, the way her smile had turned cruel when Nora had tried to leave, the way she had laughed and said, "Who would believe you? You are a maid. You have nothing. You are nobody." She was not nobody. Lucian stood in the doorway, watching her absorb this. His dark suit was impeccable as always, but there was something different about him now. Something softer. His shoulders still carried the weight of his empire, but they did not carry it alone anymore. "It is finished," he said simply. The same words he had spoken last night, but they carried different meaning now. They were not a promise. They were confirmation. Both of them have been neutralized. One through direct action. One through the system. Both are removed from your life. Nora looked up at him, and her one good eye, the other still purple with fading bruises, held his gaze with a steadiness that had not been there 4 days ago. You did this, she whispered. I did what needed to be done, Lucian replied. Bruno contacted federal agents who owed me favors. Luca provided financial records that Catherine's own accountant had flagged. The Torino organization ensured that Douglas Hale would have nowhere to run. Justice took many forms, Nora. But it was justice. Bruno quietly set the tablet on the mantel and excused himself, the click of the door closing behind him the only sound in the room besides the crackling fire. Nora's hand moved to her pocket. The photograph of Michael had stayed there through everything, the beating, the collapse at Lucian's door, the fever, the fear, the waiting. She pulled it out now, her fingers trembling as they traced his young face, his kind eyes, the smile that had meant hope to her for so long. When I was cleaning your lodge 3 months ago, she began, her voice barely audible, like a confession in a church, I heard Bruno and Luca talking. They were discussing a trafficking ring that had taken a senator's daughter. You stopped them. Not for money. Because you had a sister once who disappeared. Lucian's entire body stilled. I had no way to contact you, Nora continued, her eyes still fixed on Michael's photograph. I was nothing to you. A maid who emptied trash cans and scrubbed floors. But I thought if anyone would understand what Douglas Hale was doing, what Catherine Mercer was helping him do, it would be someone who had lost the way I lost. So I planned. Every time I came to clean, I gathered courage. I was going to find a way to ask you. To beg you. The silence stretched between them like a held breath. When Hale found me Wednesday night, when he caught me trying to leave, I did not run in a random direction. I ran toward your lodge. I ran toward the only person I thought might believe that I deserved to be saved. But I was beaten so badly, I could not form words. I could not tell you what I had come to ask. I could only collapse at your door like garbage and hope that your shadow might fall on me with mercy. Lucian crossed the room in 3 steps. He moved to kneel beside her chair, his expensive slacks bending against the hardwood floor, his expensive shoes silent on the ground. He was eye level with her now, his dark gaze intense and burning, and when he reached out, his hand was gentle. You saw me, he said quietly. His voice was like thunder, but the thunder that comes after you have already survived the storm. When I stood in front of that photograph of my sister, when I thought I was alone in my grief, you saw me. Truly saw me. In all my years, all my power, all my money and my men and my empire, I had convinced myself that I was invisible in the way that mattered. That nobody would see the boy who lost his sister to violence and never got to say goodbye. But you saw him. Tears ran down Nora's face now, but they were not the tears of the woman who had collapsed on his doorstep. These were different tears. These were the tears of someone who understood that salvation works both ways, that the person who saves you is often the person you have already saved without knowing it. I did not know what I needed until you showed me, Lucian continued, his hand still gentle on her shoulder. I was becoming the man my brother wanted me to be. Merciless. Ruthless. Capable of anything. You reminded me that there is a difference between power and cruelty. You reminded me that the strongest thing a man can do is show mercy to someone the world has already broken. You saved me, Nora Morgan, on a night when I was about to lose myself completely. The door opened quietly, and Emma stood there, her small frame barely visible in the hallway light. Behind her, Nora's sister held her shoulders, tears streaming down her own face. Emma's dark eyes, Michael's eyes, widened when she saw her mother. Mommy, she said, and the word was so simple, so ordinary, that it broke everything open. Nora was on her feet in an instant, and Emma ran into her arms. The 7-year-old with pigtails and Michael's eyes collided with her mother with the force of all the days they had been separated, all the nights Emma had cried for a voice she could not reach, all the mornings she had asked if Mommy was coming home. Nora fell to her knees, and Emma fell with her, and they held each other like they were the only solid things in a world that had tried very hard to break them both. Nora's sister stood in the doorway with her hand over her mouth, and Lucian stepped back to give them space, but his eyes never left them. "The medical debt has been paid," he said quietly to Nora's sister. "First and last month's rent on a house in Los Feliz. 3 bedrooms. A yard where Emma can play. A place where your sister can build the life she deserves." Emma pulled back from her mother's embrace and looked up at Lucian. She studied his expensive suit, his scars, his powerful frame, the way he carried himself like a man who commanded armies. Then she looked past all of it, the way children do, and saw something else entirely. "Are you the man who keeps Mommy safe now?" she asked. "Yes," Lucian said simply. He knelt again, this time to Emma's height, and produced a small velvet box from his jacket pocket. "I am going to keep her safe for as long as she lets me." Inside was a silver bracelet, delicate and simple, engraved with the date Emma had learned her mother was alive, the date her life had changed. "For being brave while your mom was away," Lucian said, fastening it gently around Emma's small wrist. "You are very brave. Like your mother." Emma touched the bracelet with wonder, then looked at her mother. Nora nodded, and Emma threw her arms around Lucian's neck with the absolute faith of a child who had learned that sometimes danger and salvation wear the same face. 6 months passed like water flowing downstream, gentle and inevitable. Nora arrived at the mountain lodge on a Friday evening in late spring, letting herself in with her own key. The lodge was hers now, in every way that mattered. She had managed the housekeeping staff for 3 of Lucian's Los Angeles properties, earning $65,000 a year with benefits and a company car that was paid for and insured and absolutely, unquestionably hers. The bruises had long faded. The fear had transformed into something else, confidence, maybe, or the kind of peace that comes from having survived something that was supposed to destroy you. She found Lucian at his desk, dark suit jacket removed, white shirt sleeves rolled up, reading through contracts with a kind of careful attention that had made him powerful. She set down his coffee the way he liked it, dark roast, 2 sugars, heavy cream, and he looked up with a smile. A real smile. The kind that was rare and genuine and reserved only for her. They did not need words. She settled across from him with her laptop, reviewing staff schedules while he continued his work. The fireplace crackled with warm light. Snow fell softly outside, but the lodge was warm. The silence between them was not empty. It was full of everything they did not need to say. Bruno entered without knocking, a habit of 15 years, and stopped short at the sight of them. The powerful Mafia boss and the former maid, working in comfortable proximity, the light from the fire painting them both gold. Bruno shook his head with a small, knowing smile and quietly withdrew. Nora pulled the photograph of Michael from her pocket. She still carried it, always would. But it was not a reminder of loss anymore. It was a reminder of the love that had taught her she deserved to be saved. She set it on the desk between them, and Lucian reached across the space separating them, his hand covering hers. One hand reached out at the right moment had changed an entire life. This story teaches us that even in the darkest moments, love finds a way. If you believe that, hit like and subscribe. Leave a comment and tell us how this story made you feel. Thank you for staying with us until the very end.